This is set up like a typical cow camp would have been set up back when they used to drive cattle from Texas to Kansas to the railheads to ship to market. The cook's day started about 2 in the morning, ended about 8, 9 o'clock at night. So he would serve 3 meals a day, and they were beans, biscuits, and coffee. 3 meals a day for as long as they were on the trail. I've read accounts where cowboys off the trail, when they got to a town, they'd start eating other foods, they would get sick. They'd get diarrhea or they'd get upset stomachs because their bodies weren't used to other foods, just beans, biscuits, and coffee. They would have beans, flour, bacon, salt pork, dried beef. If they could get dried fruit, they would have dried fruit, and the cook could reconstitute the fruit and make a pie. In the box itself is generally all the utensils and small items, you know, like salt, pepper. He would have liniments because they had to take care of horses. And he would have a certain amount of what back then would be considered first aid stuff, you know, a needle and a thread. If somebody got cut, he'd stitch them up, you know, stuff like that. The majority of the food was kept in the wagon, which would be like 50-pound sacks of beans and flour and all that kind of stuff.
So you were the medic too?
Yeah, the cook, he wore quite a few hats. He had to be a teamster, and I'm not talking union. I don't know if anybody knows their Old West history, but teamsters were guys who drove teams and wagons. That was a teamster.
Was there like a guild?
No.
Teamsters?
No, they just called them teamsters.
Did they get good pay, I hope?
The cooks were the second highest paid on the crew.
Okay. And what was the highest paid?
The trail boss. Trail boss was highest paid, then the cook, then the cowboys, then the wrangler. He took care of the horses. They would have a herd of about 100 to 150 horses, because each cowboy had 3 or 4 horses, and there'd be 12 to 17 of them. So that's a pretty good sized herd.
That's nice.
And if there was a helper, the helper would help both the cook and the wrangler. And the cook's helper was always called Little Mary. And where the term came from, I don't know. I mean, you could be 6'8" and weigh 280, but you were Little Mary if you were the cook's helper.
You just had to suck it up and get called Little Mary.
Yeah, because what they did is there were towns along the way, okay? Now the towns may not have been right on the trail, so the cook, if he needed resupply, he would break off, go into town, get what he needed, and come back out and set up for dinner. So they always had plenty of food. That generally wasn't an issue. Now fresh meat, they never had fresh meat unless a steer went down. If a steer went down, they would have fresh meat that night, and they would cut enough off that beef to last 2 to 3 days, because that's about all the longer it lasts without refrigeration.
And you were on the road for how many days at a time?
It could be anywhere from a month and a half to 5 months.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
5 months?
That's when they drove herds from Texas up here.
Wow, that's like, so you carried 5 months? No, you had to stop and get free provision.
Right. Like I said, they knew where and how long it would take to get from one place to another to provision.
Between towns where you had to like
that I don't know. That I can't tell you. But you know, they would, and when they'd hit a town, they knew how far and how long it would take to get to the next one, so they'd get that much food. That way you're not overloading the wagon. You know, if they had a second wagon, it would be called the hoodlum wagon. And that wagon would carry all the bedrolls, all the horseshoes, horseshoe nails, all the shoeing tools, and whatever other tools they need.
What were some of the best cook names you've heard?
The most common was Camp Cook or Cookie. Cookie was the most common. There's also Belly Cheater, Biscuit Burner, you know, just some different ones. Those are the ones I can remember off the top. The first one is always mine.
As it should be.
Well, no, because it breaks. These are made with lard, the old-fashioned way.
free crap back in the day.
Well, you got to remember that the amount of calories they were burning was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, they needed it.
So, and I don't know if you've done any reading about Lewis and Clark, but they would eat 14 pounds of meat per day per man.
Wow.
What?
Per man.
14 pounds?
pounds, yes. And it would be,
You encouraged me from me.
and what they liked the most out of everything was the fat. They craved fat, and their system needed fat to burn. So sourdough, because you know, if you wanted to make a buttermilk biscuit or anything, you really couldn't, because there's no way to have buttermilk. And sourdough does not require milk or anything, it's just water. So
Better for you.
go ahead. It's boiled coffee. In other words, you bring your water to a boil, dump your coffee in, stir it up real good, put it back on the fire, bring it to a second boil. And once it's done that, then you pull it off the fire, let it quit boiling and roiling and carrying on. And once it's settled down, then you pour cold water over the top.
Really?
And that drops the grounds to the bottom. Yep.
Real name and
Yeah, my name is Ray Nardini. And like I say, I showed an interest in cooking at about 8 or 9 years old. And my grandma picked up on that, so I learned to cook from my grandmother. And so all through school, that's what I did to make money. I worked in coffee shops and cafeterias and stuff as a cook. And then I became a fireman. So I was a firehouse cook for 30 years. So I picked this up along the way, just here and there. And started cooking with Dutch ovens and cast iron and fell in love with it. And so I do this not near as much as I used to, because we don't go camping anymore, but I've always wanted to set up some irons in the backyard so I could play in the backyard, but I haven't. So, but it's just a lot of fun. Oh, to me, it's the flavor of the food out of a Dutch oven. I mean, you make a stew in a Dutch oven, to me, it's so much better than in an aluminum pot or a stainless steel pot. I don't know why, but I just like it out of cast iron. And I got gobs of cast iron at home, so I cook just about anything I want in cast iron. And it's just enjoyable.